Good morning. My name is Amelia Mam, and my teammates and I focused on shipbuilding. So our client was shipbuilding. That's a very broad topic. And after discussing with the client, what we decided to focus on was the Columbia-class submarine, which is the Navy's top acquisition priority. So we viewed the Columbia-class submarine through the lens of shipbuilding and budget, which are very closely intertwined. So what we're going to talk to you this morning about is who's talking about the Columbia and the shipbuilding overall. Whose voices are the most resonant? What is the tone? What's being said? Is it positive, negative, or neutral? And we identified 3 periods in particular where the majority of the conversation was being had. So we're going to dive into those a little bit further.
Good morning. My name is Rick Moore. So a bit of a history on Navy shipbuilding. For the past 50 years, following every major conflict or every major inflection point, we go through a period of downsizing, which kind of changes our mission role a little bit. Getting towards the global war on terror, especially, the Navy shifted towards more littoral operations, more support for forces ashore. Now that we're back in the era of great power competition, we're in a growth trajectory for the Navy. So we are expanding our blue water capability against peer threats. And what we're looking for in our immediate analysis is what is Navy's effectiveness in talking about shipbuilding growth, and then the specifically for the Columbia-class submarine, is it going to be the deterrent, the nuclear deterrent for the future?
Good morning, everyone. Colin Kennard here. For our content analysis, we used Muckrack to search for articles that related to the U.S. Navy shipbuilding and the Columbia-class submarine. So from about June of 2020 to just last month, we found and then coded 146 articles using 62 unique variables. So when we take a look at sources and outlets, not surprisingly, defense, national, international news led the way, with local outlets just off the podium. We identified our top 10 outlets, which represent about over 40% of the coverage on the entire subject. So we refer to those top 10 outlets as our high payoff outlets. Of note, there are a couple local outlets in there. So it's important for us to remember that outlets with a proximity to shipbuilding communities certainly play a large influence in this conversation. Now, when we narrow in on our top 3 outlets, USNI leads the way, followed by Defense News. But importantly, in third is Bloomberg. So Bloomberg reported on this subject quite a bit, and they also average about 36 million viewers to their website once a month.
Greetings, I'm Josh Hayes. So we selected the top 3 journalists based on their prominence, their proximity to the issues, and then overall engagement opportunities for leaders to make those positive connections and build those beneficial relationships with them in the future. So we're taking a look at who the leading voices are. So what we found was in 55% of our articles, we either had a military or legislative leader voice come up in those articles. However, the volume of negative articles we found actually reduces when there's a uniformed Navy personnel speaking on behalf of the Navy on the issue of the Columbia or shipbuilding. So bottom line, right now, the Navy has the opportunity to shape the narrative of the Columbia-class submarine.
So as Amelia mentioned before, there were 3 key inflection points during our media analysis, 3 periods during the analysis that yielded the most volume in reporting. So 3 distinct periods yielded 34% of all of the coverage. And we really did a deep dive in each of these areas to see what the tone and content of the stories were during these periods. And the first one was October 2020, when the former Secretary of the Navy, Braithwaite, announced the second boat of the Columbia class would be named the Wisconsin. And about a week later, another significant event was the Navy awarded a $9.5 billion contract for the first 2 boats in the class. So we saw there that during that time period was a 60% of all the reporting was positive. And what we looked at that was interesting was since Secretary Braithwaite did a announcement, they probably knew the contract was going to come out. It served as a primer to media, which yielded a increase in the volume of stories, and it also directly affected the tone, which was significant for Navy communicators to consider.
And for our second time period, which wasn't as big as the other 2, but it occurred in mid to late December, where national attention was focused on the $2.3 trillion omnibus spending bill. Now that had a lot of COVID money in it, so it had kind of everyone's attention. But within that bill, what it included was defense spending. And within the defense spending was like $23 billion for the Navy shipbuilding. So we start to see some positive messages present in this national article or national articles because the Columbia class is being brought up in this spending bill. Around the same time, we saw some initial reports on a government accountability office report that would foreshadow some of the potential concerns for the Columbia class submarine program.
So the GAO report was significant because leading up to this, the reporting on the Columbia overall had been neutral or positive. But as my colleague had mentioned, the GAO report indicated that there might be some delays or some obstacles that the shipbuilding community was going to face. So again, that inserted a little bit of doubt. The most active voices in the articles that included the GAO were US representatives. So what does this say to us? Although the publication of a maybe not so favorable report might be seen as a threat to communication, we really need to engage in these not so optimal periods, because if we're not talking about it, somebody else is going to talk about it. So regardless of whether or not we want to engage, we need to engage because we got to continue to put that Navy messaging back into the conversation.
So the third and final spike came at the end of May. That was when the FY22 presidential budget was passed to Congress. So this event, compounded by the GAO report that Amelia just talked about, we saw an increase in negative reporting. So although what I mentioned earlier, the Navy leaders were engaged in approximately about 50% of these articles, media ultimately expressed that they really understand what the Columbia class submarine does for deterrence, but they also believe that the Navy is underfunded when it comes to this topic.
So we went into the time periods that were distinct in our analysis. Then we also did a deeper examination of the messages and by theme. So we looked at the Columbia messaging, we looked at the budget, and then we also looked at shipbuilding. So I'll begin with the Columbia. The messages for the Columbia class submarine were overall the top performing for our entire media analysis. The top two Columbia messages resonated the best and the most. And the messages were that the Columbia is a good investment for the future of the Navy, and it is considered the future of the Navy's strategic deterrence, which is our leg of the nuclear triad. So overall, positive reception there. And in fact, 65% of the articles that we examined contained a Columbia message. So the saturation is really getting in there. It's something that Navy communicators should include in shipbuilding conversations.
So the budget was actually the most prominent messages that were out there, with approximately 70% of all the articles mentioning something along the budget. The reporting ultimately underscored the fact that the Navy's top acquisition priority is the Columbia class submarine. However, they lack the overall financial latitude to implement the program and to get the success and results they need in shipbuilding.
So the final theme that we took a look at were the shipbuilding messages, right? So shipbuilding gets brought up in more than 50% of the articles that we took a look at. And unfortunately, the top message for shipbuilding is a counter message. So there's a lack of confidence in the Navy's overall shipbuilding policy, whether or not we're going to be able to meet those goals, whether or not, as Josh mentioned, we have the financial wherewithal to do that. So I think the opportunity here, because the Columbia is so new, because the messaging has been largely positive, is if you are discussing the Columbia and shipbuilding at the same time, you need to kind of bolster the Columbia messages, because we think that that's going to increase the tone of the message and make it more favorable. Also, if you have the opportunity to pick the two apart, and because shipbuilding is such a broad topic, while we didn't get into some of the platforms, I think that providing some of those nuanced opportunities to explain why the Columbia is very much still on track is going to yield dividends.
So when we take a look at our findings recommendations, the first thing we identify is that events matter. Congressional hearings, major project milestones, certainly anything to do with money or the budget. This is where the conversation is taking place. So our recommendation is to engage in the narrative in those time periods, better frame the Columbia so that we can fill in the gaps and lean on our effective messaging.
Our second finding and recommendation is more to the point to continue with that engagement. So interestingly enough, PAOs were not mentioned in a lot of the articles. We're not quoted in a lot of articles that we coded for. Who's being quoted? It's the Navy leadership. It's the U.S. representative. So again, how do we get the Navy messaging into the conversation? We need to do it vis-a-vis the Navy leadership. So continue to engage, having engagements also not on the media side, but with Congress to kind of continue to educate them about what the Navy's shipbuilding plan is and the importance of the assets, in particular the Columbia. We think is going to be really beneficial for the future.
So the third finding that we examined was that the Columbia messages seem to perform well, even when on a backdrop of shipbuilding story or shipbuilding sentiment that performed poorly. So even if the Navy's plan didn't look as if it was being executed correctly, Columbia looked like it was on track and looked like it was a valuable investment. So our recommendation is for communicators and Navy leadership, use the Columbia as a platform. Talk about it more. Talk about when major milestones for the construction arise, whenever a new platform is going to be named. These are opportunities to reach out to our key audiences and keep the drumbeat going. Even if shipbuilding or the budget don't look the best, Columbia is going to be the best constant throughout our communications efforts in the next few years.
And our final finding is that the Navy is ultimately losing the shipbuilding narrative. In absence of uniformed personnel, the media is seeking non-Navy voices to put in their story. But that's okay, because we believe the way forward for the Navy is ultimately engaging with those local media that's located around those submarine shipbuilding hubs early and often, and building those positive, beneficial relationships between the Navy and their stakeholders. So thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to participate in this research. This will conclude our brief, and we'll turn it over to questions and comments. Thank you very much.